Welcome back. We are finally on our final video of our series on making remote work work. We have covered all three of the pillars required. So we've looked at practicality, in which we looked at the software and equipment you need to have in place. In legality, we looked at how you protect yourself, your worker, your company in a remote environment. And in productivity, we looked at how you make sure the work gets done well, and you're looking after the well-being of your employees, because happy, connected teams produce good work. Now, today's video is still linked to productivity, because in a previous video, I mentioned that part of your job as a manager is to give your staff workload that pushes them to perform without causing them to burn out. Now, we looked at building connection and rapport first, because if your communication is not open and honest, and you're not giving yourself chances to actually interact with them, then you're going to find it much, much harder to recognize when a team member needs to be encouraged to push a bit harder, or when they're experiencing burnout and they need to step back. Because burnout is a very, very real problem in today's world. And that's what I want to go deeper into in this video. So in 2019, WHO officially recognized burnout as a medical diagnosis. And in 2020, there were significant increases in burnout rates worldwide, with good reason. However, even after the pandemic has become a nasty memory for us, burnout statistics do not seem to be falling. These are from 2022, but they are still going up today. So 79% of surveyed employees experience work-related stress. 3 out of 5 of them report that that stress actually negatively impacts the rest of their lives and their work. So that includes lack of interest, decreased motivation, drops in energy, and a lack of effort at work. 36% report cognitive weariness, 32% report emotional exhaustion, and 44% report physical fatigue. They're tired all the time. 91% of professionals report that they have unmanageable levels of frustration and stress, which is negatively impacting the quality of their work. And 83% of professionals state that burnout from work has negatively impacted their personal relationships. Burnout causes a significant decline in 3 very vital cognitive functions. It is your executive function, in other words, your ability to think and act on your thoughts, your attention to and your ability to focus, and your memory retention. So these 3 items are very badly affected by burnout. They go down significantly, and we need all 3 of these at peak to be good accountants. And the accounting industry is one of the hardest hit by burnout. So bear in mind that these numbers are from accountants who've answered surveys, but then they've also been compared to other industries that have answered surveys. 99% of accountants have admitted to burnout or chronic workplace stress. That is the highest level in any burnout survey worldwide. 85% of these accountants admit that they've had to reopen their books at least once for a client in order to fix errors they shouldn't have made in the first place. 49% admit that they've had to do this 2 or 3 times in the year to correct errors they shouldn't have made once, let alone twice. So this is what is happening when burnout affects your team members. Burnout is a very real problem in our industry, and it is a very real danger to the quality of the work we produce. And we have more than one issue that we're facing here. The skills shortage that pushed you to consider remote workers in the first place, and that's why you're watching these videos, makes the danger of burnout even more real for your current team, because it most commonly happens to our best employees. It is most commonly our high achievers that burn out, because they tend to be the team members who push themselves and want to prove themselves, and they're the team members that you rely on the most, the team members you keep turning to when there's an important project or a major deadline. This makes it very important that you as a manager can recognize burnout, know how to mitigate burnout, and you try and plan your workloads to prevent it. So first, let's understand what causes it. Burnout happens when too much responsibility, such as a heavy workload, is combined with a lack of resources. So for most employees, resources would be time. As a business owner, your resources could be employees or money. But when these two things are combined with sustained chronic stress, burnout happens. Immovable deadlines in our industry can also make our workloads far more stressful. So I also want to stop here and point out that burnout can be completely unrelated to a person's work. We are looking at it from a work perspective, and it's good to have the knowledge in the back of your mind. But you also need to be aware of the fact that even if you balance your team members' work well, you could still have individuals who burn out due to issues in their personal lives. Because it isn't caused by too heavy a workload, it is too much responsibility combined with the lack of resources and the chronic stress. So in a work context, the responsibility is normally related to workload and deadlines and that sort of thing. But it is possible for your team members to burn out because they're carrying too much in their families and their homes and their emotional situations, and work is just an additional burden over and above. This is one of the reasons it is important to get to know your team members personally. And also, we recommend actively tracking their energy and stress levels. This is much harder with a remote worker than an employee who sits next to you in the office, but it is possible if you make the time to get to know them and to build that connection. You may not be able to prevent burnout, the results from a personal cause, but you can preempt it, and you can sit with HR to make a plan so that that burnout doesn't affect the rest of your team and your team's deadlines and your clients. So let's take a look at the symptoms of burnout so you can try and pick up on them early. Burnout symptoms involve chronic physical and emotional exhaustion, severe cynicism, and reduced performance. It is important to remember that burnout is not stress. It is a state of total depletion. Your employee is not just a bit stressed and a weekend off will help them. They are completely and utterly depleted when you get to burnout phase. You don't want yourself or your employees to reach burnout. You want to stop it long before it gets there. So please keep an eye out for these key signs. The first is physical and mental exhaustion. So if you're seeing in yourself or your team members persistent fatigue, illness, headaches, or trouble focusing, if you're constantly drained and tired, pay attention. If performance begins to decline, in other words, there's an increase in errors or missing deadlines or reduced work quality, don't necessarily bomb on them in a performance review. Ask them some questions to see what is going on. Behavioral changes can be a symptom of burnout. Increased irritability or pessimism or being uncharacteristically quiet. So if they are normally outgoing and chatty and they're suddenly gone quiet, pay attention. Withdrawal or isolation is a big symptom. Disconnecting from team activities for remote workers, specifically increased silence or avoiding meetings, avoiding interaction, it's a bad sign. Reduced motivation. This could be feeling overwhelmed, they could be feeling cynical, they could be questioning the value of their work or their choice of a career. These are burnout symptoms, especially if these were employees who were previously loving what they do. And then there's a work-life imbalance. This, you might think that this is a good team member when they neglect their personal needs and they skip their lunch breaks or work excessive hours, but that is a bad sign. That is someone who is not balancing their lives and they're putting more into their work, possibly because they're feeling overwhelmed and unable to cope. So your key signs that you want to be looking for as a manager is feeling drained despite rest. So if they do have a long weekend or they go on holiday and they come back tired, pay attention. If they lose interest in their work or they don't take personal pride in work that they used to be excited about, if they are suddenly getting frequent headaches or stomach pain or sick days, and if they are not as motivated as they were before, pay attention. These are not necessarily signs that they're becoming a bad employee. These are signs that they're overloaded. You can deal with the burnout and get them back to a healthy state where they can be a great employee again. So, what are the steps you can take as a manager? The first and most important one is to have a conversation. Not a what's going on with you, why aren't you performing? A supportive one-to-one where you ask them how they are, what's going on, and what is currently most draining for them. Find out what is going on. And please, this is not a shallow conversation. If you just ask someone who's burnt out how they are, they will say, I'm fine. And they are lying. You need to ask questions. You need to point out kindly that they have been looking tired, that they are making mistakes, that they're not as passionate as they were before. Ask them questions. Be as supportive as possible. Don't make them feel like they're being criticized. Help them to understand that you are wanting to help them, even if it means them leaving. They probably won't. But if you give them that safety net saying, I want to make sure that you are okay, then they will open up to you and be honest. And that's important in healing burnout. The next thing you have to do is review the workload. So identify which tasks can be delegated, postponed, or removed to reduce the pressure that they're under, the pressure that you've identified in this conversation. Encourage them to take time off. So if they've accrued vacation time or sick days, tell them to use them. I know that this is a difficult thing to deal with when you already have a small practice, you're already under massive pressure, and you were probably looking at remote workers because you couldn't find talented staff or you couldn't afford talented staff in your area. So now telling a talented best employee to take time off is terrifying for you as a business owner. But I just want to remind you that if you don't, they could actually burn out completely. They could have a mental breakdown. And worse, one of the most likely things that a burnt out person will do is resign. So it is better, especially if we're talking about one of your top performers, one of your best team members, it is better to have them take a few weeks off, even if it is the worst possible time of year for them to do it, than for you to lose them completely because they fall apart and they resign. Spend some time reconfirming priorities, so clarify expectations with them to reduce uncertainty and stress, and not just to reduce the uncertainty. Some of your employees might be burning out because they're of uncertainty. So they haven't prioritized their work correctly and they're just trying to do everything all at once. Some of your employees might have difficulty in people pleasing. So they want to keep everybody happy and you cannot do that. So again, clarify priorities in terms of clients and who they should keep happy, as well as managers and who they should keep happy, and then work in deadlines that are important. And offer flexibility during the time that they need to recover. So it can be temporarily adjusted hours, or it says the normal suggestion is remote work options, but if this is a remote work employee, that's not going to help. You want to look at temporarily adjusted hours or ways of logging in, different ways of blocking the work and measuring the work so that they can feel that they can handle their workload and their life and their recovery as best as possible. The biggest thing that you can do to help a burnt out worker is to show that they are valued. Show appreciation, thank them, and support them. Someone who is depleted doesn't have it in them to do more. So you can't suggest time management, you can't suggest exercise, or anything along those lines. You want to help reduce the stress, reduce the pressure, and give them space to heal. Burnout is my personal passion. If you are struggling with burnout yourself, or if you realize that your team is, please reach out to me and book a virtual coffee. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can send me an email. You can book me on my calendar. I will happily talk you through what you can do about healing burnout. My entire story of my burnout that I went through while building my accounting practice is on LinkedIn. I'm very passionate about preventing it in others. You can also grab my free book. I'll put the link below. But if you are feeling drained, please grab the book or give me a shout. Don't live with burnout. It just gets worse. That has brought us to the end of our series on making remote work work. I hope you have found it valuable and helpful. Please don't forget to grab all of our free guides. They are 100% free. I'll put the whole list in the underneath this video. And if you do need help finding the perfect remote working team member or on getting set up so that you're ready for them, please give us a shout. We would love to help you find them or to find them for you.